Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the Ron Paul Liberty Report. I am the host, Ron Paul.
And I'm the co-host, Daniel McAdams.
Daniel, there's a few things going on in foreign policy, believe it or not, that raises more questions than answers. And one event is something that it's controversial and people are going to read into it, all different things. But the one objection I have to this recent killing, Nemtsov, you know, the political conservative who whatever we want to call him, disapproved of Putin. But immediately he was killed and everybody knows the answer. It sort of reminds me of MS-17, the airliner that went down over Ukraine, which was a big, big event. And it was pumped out there endlessly, and everybody knew the Russians shot that plane down. Yeah. And we expressed reservations that, I don't know who did it, but why are we even involved over there, and how do they know so much? And just starting with that and knowing what thing, I mean, just think about the ability. We're involved in there. We're involved worldwide, and we have all this radar. We know everything anybody ever says, and yet there's no recordings of anything. And yet NSA has a recording of every single one of us, every telephone call, and every email we have, and yet we don't know anything, and we've never heard, you know, the results of that. And that sort of reminds me of that particular case. But on Nemtsov, here's a guy that gets killed right downtown in Moscow, and the first question comes up: who benefits? Who's going to benefit the very most from this, and who benefits the very least? And I think I have a suspicion on the people you might suggest.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, our friend Justin Raimondo of antiwar.com had a column out right after the killing. You know, he said, why is everyone jumping to conclusions? There hasn't even been an investigation done yet. Yeah. But it's, as you point out, it's exactly the same as they did with the Malaysian airliner. It's almost as if the so-called free Western media wants to use this as a propaganda tool from the immediate get-go. You know, they paint Putin as Hitler, as Stalin, as what have you, and so everything that happens can be attributed to him. It may well have been the case. The fact is, and as Raimondo points out, we simply don't know who did it. There hasn't been an investigation. But as you say, who benefits the least from it? I would say objectively it has to be Putin. And actually, interestingly enough, even the opposition in Russia is not claiming that Putin did it. And they even admitted that it actually hurts him more than anything. Because here's a relatively minor figure, and people in the West, most people who are championing him have never heard of him. He wasn't in Parliament. His political party had 0 seats in Parliament. They weren't a popular party. So if Putin wants to knock off one of his big rivals, why not someone like Navalny, someone with a following, with some notoriety? So it doesn't make any sense. You know, one of our Institute's advisors, Mark Almond, had an article in the Telegraph right afterward where he pointed out that it could just as easily have been some Russian nationalists, hardcore nationalists, who were angry that Putin wasn't more aggressive in Ukraine. Yeah,
they thought he was too weak.
Too weak on Ukraine.
And of course, Nemtsov also took a position in the Iranian or the Ukrainian war, which might have stirred up some trouble. He identified more with the Western.
He was very close to Poroshenko, and as a matter of fact, he was an advisor to Yushchenko, who was the U.S.-backed guy who took over in the Orange Revolution.
So you mean he's closer to us than, well, of course, Putin isn't very close to the United States, and we pushed him aside. So that does raise a lot of questions. I retain a healthy skepticism of all governments and what they might do or not do, but still, evidence is important, and whether we get these answers, I think we know more about the airliner, but we don't hear much about it. But guess what, in this country, we're still arguing over who killed Kennedy. Yep. And 75% of Americans don't even believe what our government tells us, and our own CIA has been involved in a lot of shenanigans too. But I think the real goal here, and you touched on this about who benefits and who doesn't, and it's called destabilization. This helps to destabilize the government of Russia, and guess why Russia is very destabilized now, especially economically. Yeah, they're not free market people, and they haven't done this, but they're not Soviets, and they're not total socialists, and they have a lot of Keynesian economics there, similar to what we have. But they are destabilized by what tool of war? And that to me are sanctions. Sanctions, when you block things from going into a country, that to me is what you do as soon as you declare war on somebody, block there and to punish the people. So I think, the connection probably is, not direct, but it's still achieving the same thing, whether it's sanctions that we put on to destabilize. But, it's still, because I cannot quite want to believe some of the horrors that our governments do. But why out of the clear blue do they think it helps the world to destabilize Russia?
Yeah.
Have you ever given that any consideration? Who's going to benefit from like that? Like you said, who benefits?
Well, the neocons have wanted to destabilize Russia since the end of the Soviet Union. This has been their #1 project, and they've been very successful. And if you look at the pictures of Nemtsov on the internet, you'll see he's had his picture taken with John McCain, with the U.S. Ambassador McFaul, all of these people who have been very involved in trying to destabilize Russia. So it's but you point out it's not only the sanctions that destabilize, but it's also this monolithic Western war propaganda about Russia that's not helpful, it's not accurate necessarily. And as Raimondo, going back to his column, as he pointed out, Russia is far from a perfect country, as are a lot, but it's probably as free as it's ever been, even with all its faults.
I think it helps us understand, and the neocons want this, but it doesn't really answer the more subjective question I have. Why in the world would anybody, why do the neocons exist with this philosophy unless there's some deep usually behind that kind of stuff it's power and money and special interests of sorts, but I just don't want to comprehend that people can become so despicable that are willing to stir up trouble and wage war like's been going on in the Middle East since 1990, of course. So anyway, this is going to be around. I don't think we're going to have an immediate answer or immediate proof on it, but hopefully my only suggestion is go slow. Give people some time rather than saying, "Oh, we know who did it."
Don't believe the mainstream media.
Because next week this might not even be on the news anymore. Everybody knows who did it. It's been settled. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to today to the Ron Paul Liberty Report, and come back to visit soon. Thank you.